So they're like, yeah, the human part is the hardest part. And they're like, oh, we got that shit down. The other stuff we haven't figured out yet, but we human well.
Very
so
cool.
That's the big. We just left to talk on. It was a gaming DAO, but they were talking a lot about governance tokens. They had some really good points too. Yeah, Keith's around here somewhere. I think he wandered off, so, or he doesn't know where I am. Are you still positive for COVID?
Yeah, I have no symptoms, but just a bright, a faint red line that rules my life.
That's why I stopped taking the test when I got it in March. I was like, fuck this shit. I'm done.
Yes, that's where I'm at. We were just talking about a podcast appearance that you're going to need to make, Crystal, about censorship.
That'd be cool.
Okay, John, I think John is going to hook you up with that.
Okay, wait, say that again. The podcast that what?
A friend of mine, Mike Rabinovich, he's a comeback kid on Discord, and he's in the legal guild at Bankless DAO. And he has a podcast called Ab Initio that I've been producing several episodes for him. And he wanted to interview people that weren't lawyers, even though it is a legal podcast. So I suggested, well, why don't you talk about censorship, because there's a lot of legal implications for censorship. And so, yeah, I'd suggested Eric, and then Eric is like, well, I want to get Crystal on there. And I was like, of course, it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I can watch all of the Mr. Robots and all the shit to get me fired up. Yes, love that conversation.
Cool. So yeah, we were just kind of going around and just basically bullshitting and updating about what's going on elsewhere in life, which is why I started recording when you came on, because you were being the most relevant to JournoDAO. Actually, I'm just kidding. We're all relevant, but so yeah, that's where we're at.
Didn't hear from Nick.
Yeah, we didn't hear from Nick.
That's all right. Yeah, I think everybody here is kind of, Crystal's the one like actually doing relevant housekeeping type stuff, and we're kind of just talking about what we're up to, which is totally fine. But yeah, and that kind of cuts to the essential meeting versus like what's optional and where can you have supplementary stuff that you can kind of be passive with, so you don't have to allocate your time to the wrong stuff or whatever people's bandwidth is. So I've been doing a little bit more networking. I've been reaching out to some of the bigger analysts that I've been following to see if there's any interest in like actually sharing more information and getting something together. And maybe doing a workshop over at Metrics DAO. In fact, I think I'm going to. They've already approved it. They just don't have a process yet for that. I'm supposed to do some at PubDAO at some point too. I'm also doing more stuff on the investigation side that I probably shouldn't talk about too deeply while we're recording. But one thing I'll say is the link that I sent you, Eric, I've contacted that person, and that's been helpful. He's had some good tips on how to find certain stuff. So I'm just trying to find more ways to like get skills without having to master SQL in a few weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the person from a certain Telegram chat.
Yeah, that's the guy.
And Nick, have you talked to Jordan at all, or seen the thread about Diamond DAO wanting to add JournoDAO to their like Chainverse portal for basically like wanting to know if we would want to help them source people to do due diligence, help their clients do due diligence work. Are you in on that conversation?
I haven't. If that's not in the JournoDAO Diamond DAO channel on Discord, then it is. Yeah. Is it from today? Because if so, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I think it's like in the last 24 hours. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard about that yet.
Yeah, so I think they basically want to like list like they want to have like a listing of when they launch the Chainverse portal and Canvas thing, having like a list of partners that can like help clients navigate their platform. And so they were talking about like listing us as, somebody that like if they have a client that's like, oh, I want to use this to do due diligence, probably investors, it sounds like, is the kind of clients it would be, but that like they could list JournoDAO as like somebody to reach out to for help with that, which seems cool. I think that would be like on our end, like that doesn't necessarily have to, I don't think mean like people on this call are going to go do the work for, these DiamondDAO clients. I mean, that could be like something that we put out to like the larger community of data journalists, or just like people who have those skills. It's just something that we can pass on to the community as an opportunity.
I think that's interesting. I think we're probably not like a perfect fit for that, but I definitely don't mind being in contact with those people. Yeah.
I think it's like, yeah, I mean, I think it's like an interesting experiment just to see like, okay, if this work is there, if we can, connect that work to journalists looking for work, like it seems like a worthwhile thing to do. I mean, yeah, there probably are, well, there definitely are like, better fits, but they would probably be busy and more expensive. would be my pitch.
It's a very honest assessment. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea just to see what happens with it. Like I'm kind of just curious to see, who would come this way and what that conversation would look like. And then, yeah, if we have more data journalists in the community, we can then, provide an additional service for them. Just connecting them with that resource is kind of huge too. I think it's good.
So what is a data journalist?
I mean, literally, it's literally the person. I mean, traditionally, it's the person in a newsroom who knows how to use a database.
Okay, because I mean, I've been taking all these courses on LinkedIn Learning with data analysis type of tracks, and you're learning Python and SQL and stuff like that. So Nick, if you're wanting to learn that type of stuff, they have some great courses on there. I've been going through them, and that gives you like a total crash course, but it's really good.
Oh, please. I'm dead serious. I've got lots of time, and that's my current hurdle in life.
Awesome. Yeah, they have a complete track. I just finished one track, and I feel like I could I'd limp through, but I could do some pretty good data analysis by learning those basics. So yeah, for sure. Hey, what's up, Keith? I'll send you the link now.
Sure.
So I have another couple things that could tie into this. I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of the DiamondDAO Chainverse arrangement here, but if you're trying to set up some kind of a pipeline for writers, I guess specifically journalists in this case, to get work from DiamondDAO, then maybe there's some way that we can put that into the PubDAO kind of marketplace of content creators. I'm personally kind of surprised how quickly some of these tasks are being taken. I was kind of underestimating. Really? I was underestimating like the supply side of this whole thing. And like it would be easy on my end. I would just kind of set up a little space on the D work and give certain people certain managerial permissions within that. I don't know if this is something that like if JournoDAO would be managing this space, or if DiamondDAO would be, and then we would have journalists just join the PubDAO D work page. I mean, I feel like there could be some arrangements here, but I'm not familiar enough with the arrangement to say if this would really be that valuable or not.
It's evolved a lot, and like multiple times. So I would say I also would have no idea what it looks like, and if I were to tell you right now, it would probably change by the time it's implemented.
Yeah.
So.
One niche we haven't talked about that much is data visualization journalists. One of my professors from UNC he like writes textbooks on it. Twitter. So he would be one to tap into. I don't know where he stands on Web3, but he would be one that we got all kinds of weird shit like inception going on over here. Data visualization journalists might really like the Chainverse tool, and that could be a really good synchronization there. So when we get there, I can poke him and see if he's interested in Web3 at all, or find people that are. That would be a really good fit.
Yeah, 100%. I think for sure. I mean, that was really what excited me about Chainverse in the beginning. Half of what excited me about it was the visualization thing. So, I mean, I guess I just feel like, anything that is like a potential pathway for people with traditional journalism skills to be working in Web3. I mean, if we could be a conduit for that in any way, I think it, it fits the mission. So that's kind of why like when Jordan suggested that, I was like, yeah, I think we definitely could do that. And so that's interesting to hear you say, Spencer, that you underestimated the kind of supply side of the talent that's out there. Cause like, yeah, I mean, I think I could track down data journalists, but I don't know like if I just threw up a tweet, I'm not sure how many people would come running without me like reaching out directly. So that's kind of interesting that you were able to fill those bounties.
And like we're still figuring out the kind of specs of what kind of information we want standardized with these tasks that are posted, like time commitment, pay, like other kind of information that a prospective curious contributor would want before committing to some opportunity like this. But yeah, I was underestimating it. It's like these tasks were almost instantly claimed when they were posted on Do Work. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe this is better for after the agenda, is getting JournoDAO involved in the DAO coalition. So if you or Keith or Crystal would be interested in representing JournoDAO in this thing, we could move forward with that. But we can talk about that later when we get to the agenda.
Cool. Axeline, can you talk? What's going on with you? Well, are you wearing anything offensive? It's pretty offensive. I can't see it. We can kind of hear you.
It's a little weird. I'm mute on here, but I'm on camera there. Am I super quiet?
Crystal's audio is better.
Are disassociated.
Yeah.
What about now?
It's good. There's a lot of background, but we can kind of hear it.
All right. I don't know if it's using my earpods or whatever. Yeah, move on without me. I'll just do them too. So yeah, you wanna...
I don't think that Keith and Crystal can have their mics on at the same time. I think that might be it.
I swear I know technology.
Hey, that's good. Now you're good.
I know what's going on.
I was going to
You don't like my t-shirt?
I can barely see it.
Oh, now I can't hear. What's up?
I was going to try to force you to do like a detailed breakdown of everything happening with the Journo token from memory with all the background noise, and just see how you perform under pressure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I think we've simplified things a little bit, or I kind of threw out my confusion into the Discord, and everyone kind of pitched in to help. I think we still need a name for the donor token. I'm leaning towards like maybe like a Journo giver, very literal, but at least it comes up next to Journo whenever you search or it's displayed. I don't know. Or we could like Journo G or whatever. We'll get our marketing people on it. And so I think now, if you're contributing, you can put in your ETH address, or if you've connected your wallet, then whenever the Journo tokens are claimed, then the donor, the giver, will also get their give tokens or their Journo giver tokens or their use tokens or whatever. And that's, we could discuss that mechanic, but I liked that because then you don't have just people sitting on these like tokens. Like if you give the tokens right away when the money is like donated, then it's kind of like misrepresentative, like those tokens haven't actually been given yet, like they haven't explained, so they're not under the journalist's account. So the journalist isn't getting any credit, and this person is just kind of like, thank you for donating, but like hasn't materialized yet. So but yeah, and that's simpler than what we were talking about. Like, oh, maybe there's 3 tokens and proto journo token, and then that gets converted to journo, and then a lot. So there was a discussion of like an NFT kind of receipt as well that kind of embedded in NFT as a link to, like, if you wanted to donate to a journalist specifically for a particular piece of content, that you could get an NFT with like that link embedded and like the whole transaction data in it. It's kind of like a receipt or something that can be queried and used by anyone. But I haven't made any progress on that. I've just kind of solidified. I can do the Journo Giver token or the news token pretty easily. I've already started work on like updating the UI for that, and then doing the contract, working with John to get him a dev environment set up so that he can start contributing as well. So we did some really painful just debugging of Windows on Sunday, and it's pretty much par for the course. I've had to do that. Like, I feel like 50% of my dev time is just like installing software correctly so that it'll work. That's all I got.
Right on. Yeah, and we made some progress in just kind of getting some of the payment infrastructure set up. So and we've made steps towards being able to have like an actual bank account and Stripe payment system, like taking the first steps to actually do that. A JournoDAO tax ID is on the way, unfortunately, but that's something that has to happen, and then so that's in progress. And kind of along those lines, I did actually set up a multi-sig, and it's still just me on it, so I accomplished nothing in terms of taking away the entire all the risk of everything dissolving if I get hit by a bus, or if this COVID comes back for the worst. So, but like the basics of that are kind of set up. So I guess continue to let us know what we can do to support you, short of learning to code these things, which apparently it does seem like John is willing to do that. So there's some help there. But cool, yeah, that it's exciting to see that continue to move along and evolve into something that we'll get out there soon. So yeah, let us know what else we can do on that front. I'll just kind of, since we're kind of on it already, I'll just kind of go through updates and also say hi to, is Jennifer on here? Hello, Jennifer. But I'll just kind of round out let me see if I can share this here. Let's kind of go down and make sure that everything that should be mentioned gets mentioned. MCon, like, definitely keep us advised of any like exciting meetings or anything. Definitely wish we were there. And in the meantime, like the Online News Association conference is coming together rather rapidly. I need to figure out how to get some money into the hands of those people, as we owe them some. And we have secured an Airbnb for John, Keith, myself, and also Evan Hansen from Factland. Yeah, we'll be doling out our first, I guess, one of our first founder NFT benefits, which is that Evan gets the big bet. So that's big time. Like, and it kind of is big time. It's like a king bed, like in like a room all by itself. And I think like John is going to have to sleep in the refrigerator or something. But like, so we've got, it seems like from the profile, it seems like a fairly swanky little complex, a couple of blocks from where the conference is, I believe, in downtown LA. So I don't know how far away Spencer and Jennifer are, but yeah, it'd be cool to do a dinner or something with everyone that is in town, and just have a spot to hang out. We're there Wednesday. I'm there Wednesday through Saturday. John, you're getting there earlier. You're just gonna like spend Monday and Tuesday skateboarding, I guess.
I'm leaving Monday morning, so it
Uh-huh.
should put me there about Tuesday sometime.
Oh, okay. So you're just there a day ahead of us. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm just gonna bum around.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. So I guess we'll pick you up from, you know, wherever, whatever bridge you're sleeping under, and then we'll take you to the Airbnb. So like kind of the plan as of right now, you know, we've got an hour presentation on Thursday afternoon, and a couple, you know, it's funny, like so we're technically a sponsored Web3 session. There are two other Web3 sessions on the agenda, both moderated by the guy from ICFJ, who seems to be one of the biggest Web3 skeptics. I mean, just based on his demeanor on Twitter. So that's interesting. One of those is kind of a town hall discussion about Web3 on Friday. So it would be interesting to try and go participate in that. But I find that interesting that half or more of the Web3 content is going to be from kind of a skeptical perspective, it appears. But what I wanted to say was, in terms of like content to fill our hour, you know, we have the deck that Crystal and I worked on that I delivered in Argentina, and that is about a 20-minute talk. And then there is like, I presume we could show the video that Hannah's editing together for us. That's probably gonna be about 4 or 5. But part of me is like, I don't know, we could also just basically do the format where John could basically host a panel, kind of like we've done, or kind of like we did with Hannah. And like we could just basically do it more off the cuff, you know, have some planned questions that would, you know, get at what we want to be sure to get at in the beginning, and then open the panel up to questions from the audience. I kind of wonder if that more casual way of dealing with it might be better than getting up there and starting off with you know, a deck and a planned lecture. And I say this partly because after giving the talk in Argentina, I didn't get a lot of feedback on it, and the feedback that I got was all from people. It wasn't people that I needed feedback from. It was people who were like totally Web3 literate, and they're like, "Oh, this is great. I've been looking for somebody, you know, who's been talking about Web3 and journalism forever, and like, you're finally it." Like, that's the feedback I got, but I didn't get the. I was kind of left with the impression, wondering if I had confused all the nudes. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that, particularly John and Keith, on, you know, how best to handle it?
Keith just wandered off to check to see what they're talking about, because there's a community management thing we wanted to see. But my 2 cents is a very quick, like, shorten the deck to just basically kind of a who we are, and a very, very top level, this is the conversation, maybe the 4 pillars or something, very like one slide, and then the panel discussion, because that's the format they're using here, and I really like it. It's a 2-person panel. and then one person is interviewing the other one, and it's very casual and it's very effective. So I'm not taking a lot of notes, I'm not seeing a lot of slides and data, but I'm retaining the actual conversation a lot better for some of these high level concepts. So that's just my 2 cents. And if I fall off, I'm gonna run upstairs. So
Okay. We seem to have lost everyone else, but what do you think, John?
Yeah. I'm down for some like basic slides and just to kind of use them as a backboard, you know, to be able to punch topics off, keep people on track, keep people within time and things like that. And if, you know, a question from somebody turns into a ramble, you have something to kind of use as a way to keep the conversation going. I think one of the fundamental things you said, a lot of people that were engaging you were the wrong people to engage you, and Web3 were people who were already savvy with Web3. Maybe kind of I'm writing an article right now, actually. And I don't know if you guys will be able to use it or not, but I'm just trying to collect all my thoughts in one place about how journalism and Web3 fit together. And, you know, and I'm starting this off as describing Bitcoin, because most people, when you hear about Bitcoin, they like, well, we already have digital money. All you got to do is swipe your card at the register and you can get your bag of chips at the Quickie Mart. You know, how's that not digital? You know, that's digital money. We don't need Bitcoin for digital money. So why do you need Web3 with journalism? And so what I'm trying to do with this Bitcoin analogy is to figure out how to explain the process when you're buying that bag of chips at the Quickie Mart, that it has to go through the credit card company, who in turn messages the bank, checks your account to see that it's there, pull the account back, then go back to the credit card company, then go back to the Quickie Mart. And then within all that, there's all these centralization and censorship points. And then take that and then apply it and lay it on top of journalism and how it goes through that process. And then explain how that centralization there creates choke points of censorship. And then just kind of create some kind of more familiar analogy with it. Because I don't know how the journalism process goes. You know, I'm not an insider. So if I could ask you guys, how does this match? Like, what does a news story go through in order to get to our newspaper, to our website, to our TV screen? Like, is there a distillation process? Like, what is the actual news versus what's presented to us? Like, how many points of checkpoints does that have to go through? What if it were strictly peer to peer, you know?
Yeah, I think the trick becomes like when talking about the reporting process, you know, you're going to have an audience of people that, you know, practice it for a living, and we're here telling them like how this thing can improve it, and it's going to be very tough not to trigger like a very defensive
absolutely
reaction.
And then on top on top of that, I also wanted to talk about the fresh knowledge gap too. And then to say, well, there's all this knowledge out there, and especially with the rate at which technology is changing, we're going to like this point of singularity where it's moving so quick that the institutions and the academians can't keep up with the published materials. And by the time something is published, it's irrelevant. So this fresh knowledge gap is growing and increasing in size. So we need to break down these layers in between the actual sources of the information and the recipients in order to be able to tap into the fresh knowledge gap of people who may not necessarily have credentials or be qualified, but to be able to add to the conversation, you know, because before there's all these levels of complexity in order to be able to make your voice heard.
And are you talking about like Web3 knowledge?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Web3 knowledge specifically, but it could be anything, I guess. But, you know, with the rate of information and data collection nowadays, you know, we have IoT, which is collecting data from all types of sources everywhere. And the amount of data being collected is growing exponentially, more than humans can handle. So AI is stepping in, you know, and we can depend on AI only so much until you start getting into the point where what's the word for it? Neuron data or something like that. I'll have to look up that term. But
You mean like brain computer interfaces or?
No. It's a type of data analysis that's neural networks in data science.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we're getting to neural networks, and people can't even track neural networks, and the regulatory bodies like the GDRP in Europe, I believe, and then the California Data Privacy Act, they can't even keep up because they require that you have to log all your sources of data and the steps that you got it in collecting it. And with neural networks, you can't track that, you know? And so we're having to depend on AI for that data. And yeah, so there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed, that all this centralization is not doing nothing but encumbering it.
Right. I mean, I think where the problem with centralization would resonate with journalists is when you start talking about like Web2 social media platforms.
Okay.
It's a tricky thing because, you know, the editorial process in journalism like is centralized, right? And I actually I don't necessarily have a problem with that.
Sure.
Just because it's you know, it's basically quality control, and like the lack of quality control in social media is like a problem.
Yeah.
But underlying that is the fact that those platforms are centralized and driven by a different, they're driven by a profit motive. And they're not driven by the same ethics that is the reason for the centralization in the journalistic editorial process. It's centralized for ethical reasons, whereas the centralization that underlies Web 2 is about profit and control. And
Okay.
so one, you know, so I think it's a tricky thing. It's like there is this kind of good centralization over here and this kind of bad centralization over here that we're really trying to address.
Well, that's
Yeah.
exactly the type of conversation I want to draw out of you and Keith. You know, I want to ask these questions that I don't know, you know, and like, you know, this distinguishing between Web 2 and Web 3 centralization and the ethical centralization, I think is something that needs to be expressed and said, that a lot of people might not quite understand that nuance.
Yeah, and I mean, I've never enunciated that before. This is just kind of coming out of my brain right now. So, yeah, it's so like where I struggle with like putting together these like public talks or whatever is that there's so much to get out, and they're related because they're all Web3, but there's like Web3 is good for journalism because the business model is potentially way more sustainable, right? And like that's like I think the easiest selling point. But then there's all this other stuff that we also want to get to this audience of like, and blockchain makes sense as a tool to practice journalism because it's censorship resistant and it's more transparent. And that's like, that has nothing to do with the business model part.
Yeah.
And so that's why like, you know, give this, it's actually like an 18-minute talk where they're like trying to cover all that, and they're like related because they're all blockchain, but people are like, what the fuck? like so you're and that's also like a source of criticism where you're like, okay, so this thing is just gonna come in and like save the world and change everything.
Yeah. Well, I want to write all this out and express it in this paper, this article, I guess, and give it to you guys and have you pick it to pieces and then see what we can pull from that, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Do you have like a Google Doc or something?
Yeah, I have a Google Doc and
Okay.
I have about a page worth written right now. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good starting point. And so then maybe I've shared somewhere like the link to all the slides that I have so far, and maybe we can just like pick a few if there's some out of there that you can like pick out of there.
Okay.
That might be good. Yeah, because I kind of I rewrote the presentation for Argentina to make it like more narrative. So it's kind of hard to do like part of it without doing the whole thing. But we could definitely pick out, but some of the slides would work on their own.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I think what Crystal was saying makes sense. And I like, the more I've been like trying to picture it, particularly with like 3 of us on stage, like relying on a deck, I think makes less and less sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, when it's just like the 3 of us asking questions, it's pretty engaging. Whereas what I was doing for the keynote in Argentina, I think I'm actually kind of demanding a lot of the audience to like follow me the entire way, particularly because and most of them, they had like live translation. So like you like got headphones and there was like somebody translating. And I was like, and I looked at one point, I'm like, at the end, I'm like, wow, most people are wearing headphones. Like most of those are Spanish speakers. I bet I just lost a lot of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the panel discussion is probably the way to go.
Well, we can each pick roles, and then just kind of stick to that role and then bounce each other, like good cop, bad cop type of scenario, but without like necessarily being good or bad, just different perspectives, and represent those perspectives.
Well, I mean, your interview style is great. So I mean, I think it'd be good to have you. And it was really good in the thing we were recording with Hannah. So I mean, to like start off with like, your basic format that you're so comfortable with, I think would be good.
Okay.
At least as a starting point, and then maybe it becomes, as we go on, it becomes like more of a just natural conversation between the 3 of us. But that like kind of having that structure of you as the host, I think. What do you think of that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
What do you think, Nick? Any thoughts?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's right to try to not necessarily like, you want to simplify stuff because otherwise you're going to end up talking about computer science and nobody on earth wants to listen to that for 20 minutes. So one suggestion I would have, Eric, I don't know if you've ever listened to Gavin Wood speak. I talk about him a lot because he's a good source of information on how to narrate cryptocurrency topics. And he summarizes the blockchain concept by calling it commoditizing trust. Because it's, when you're talking about consensus, that's an easy way to kind of get people to understand that it's a way to just verify that something is true or not true. And that's a simplification for that. And I would also ask, like, I don't know what the audience is going to be like for ONA or any journalism type of conference, but I know data journalism, I'm pretty biased on that topic. So I would say incorporating data journalism is one rabbit hole you could include as a way to cover that there's information there that journalists can go get, and they don't have to be the ones to get it if other people are releasing it on Twitter and they just don't know it's there. That's a really easy thing to explain to someone. Like, you can just go to Twitter and type in Etherscan and then the topic, and you'll find data. So, and in terms of censorship resistance, I know that in journalism particularly, you have a lot of issues with defamation cases being levied against journalism groups. And I think there's a really strong case that if people in that audience understand the legal implications of cryptocurrency and Web3, I do think there's a really strong case that the information that you can get from there can be published, kind of like reporting a tweet. It's a rumor-based shitty journalism standard, but I do think it's legally okay. But I could be wrong. But I think that's a really interesting way to sell. Like, there are ways to use this, regardless of your perspective on it, to get new information out into the world. And then the information that you want to circulate that's not going to go through your platform or your journalism stuff, you do have a peer-to-peer network of people that are specialized in different ways that might be able to help you. So you can build other information networks via your journalism connections in Web3.
You mean in terms of like publishing information that could turn into a lawsuit, like without exposing yourself to that liability? Is that like what you're talking about?
Yeah. Like in the case of I don't know if you're familiar with the Ava Labs crypto leaks thing that came out pretty recently. Somebody was posting video of a lawyer from Avalanche, from like Alameda Research and Ava Labs, those guys. he owns a big law firm, and he was outed by a marketing agency who started a fake journalism website called Crypto Leaks. And this is actually, I think, really risking defamation. But it's just a video of their lawyer, their head lawyer from Ava Labs, talking about how they're doing all this illegal shit over there. And it's really damning. And there's no on-chain data in there at all. But if you were a journalist, it'd be really easy to just take that video and retweet it and or report on it as a financial scandal. So that's where I think it's simpler to just go get the on-chain data on what they've actually got. Because he was claiming he had like 1 to 2% of the Avalanche token supply. There's court docs because one of his partners ended up suing him. So there's all this stuff out there, but nobody knows it's there. Why would they? And my argument is, if you're an actual person that's interested in doing real journalism, go fucking look at it, read it, you know. But that's an idealistic way to look at journalism. So it depends a lot on your audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously sold on the idea that there's a million leads in blockchain data. The censorship resistance, they struggle a little bit with making that. It's just it's kind of a niche case that, like, it's a case that journalists in the U.S. aren't really gonna face. It's like one thing if you're like reporting in Ukraine or Russia and you want to like put your stuff, or Hong Kong, and you want to put your stuff on a blockchain that is beyond the reach of the government. Like it makes sense in those cases. In the US context, it's like a little bit harder to make it relevant to the journalists. But I mean, they'll understand those examples of reporting from those kind of zones, even like Turkey. It would be useful.
I think like the simplification for that I see, at least in terms of what they can report, that's totally risk-free. Everything on the ledger is public. That's all fair game. It's just that nobody knows how to read it. So as those information networks grow, that's the competition that's going to come out of that. Does that make sense? Like at a high level, as tools get built to look at that information, like it's Google, you know, it's going to be really easy to find stories, and people are going to start publishing them more and more, kind of similar to how Twitter grew out in the same way.
Right. I mean, it's just, there's this kind of like, you feel like you're like smashing your head against the wall of talking to a lot of journalists, because they're like, oh, it's like, you know, like all that crypto shit is bullshit. It's just like all scams and shit. It's like, I mean, but maybe go look at the scams. Like, you're a journalist, like maybe go check it out, like, or at least begin to understand the language of it, because it's like, it's not going away. Like, you seem to think it's going to be like shut down tomorrow, so you can just like continue to go through SEC filings, and that's where all the important information is. It's like shocking how few people are making any effort to become more literate at it.
Right. Well, that's why we need people like me and you and John to teach these people, like, motherfucker, wake up, there's something here. And it's not, crypto is so culty. I've actually been spending a lot of my time this year studying cults, because of how digital marketing utilizes the same exact techniques. You know, there's specific terminology for the clicks, and you were constantly reinforcing this idea that you are on the same page or syncing up with people about how great this shit is, and most of it's bullshit. So like, if you wash that out, there's still a lot of really interesting stuff going on in there because of who the players are. And there's also a lot of interesting stuff like stable coins and CBDCs. Like, the government is probably the weakest part of that equation. I don't know if journalists really know that. Like, the SEC is sanctioning a mixer and exposing billions and billions of dollars from a lot of people in their 20s who are all new money, and nobody seems to care except for people that are in crypto. That's really odd to me. So I did contact ICIJ and Bellingcat the other day. It's the first time I've reached out to them. They both replied, so I'm hoping to get something out of that.
About doing stories?
Yeah, they both seem interested.
Cool.
And it's interesting that they picked that one case of Tornado Cash when there's tons of different mixers out there, and on every blockchain basically, and they just used that one as the example, and they're not really making any effect on money laundering. They're just and I don't know. Didn't mean to sidetrack on that, but that Tornado Cash thing is just really stood out to me as far as censorship.
That's because they're weak. They're doing it to broaden their own authority, but it's also a case of they can't stop Binance and Huobi from helping the Russian government and the North Korean government launder money that's taken from hacks. That's really what that is. And there's some context there. There's some nuance about, like, we've been in a trade war with China. We can't impose our laws on how they use money, and people are using Chinese-based exchanges to launder criminally gotten money that is also, some of it peripherally is going through like terrorism organizations. So because we can't impose that stuff on East Asia based companies, that's why we're sanctioning Tornado Cash. I think that's a big part of it, because they have no authority. They can stop Binance customers from being in the US. It doesn't really work, but there's still that big open door. That's like 50% of the crypto market right there.
Yeah,
And it's also opening the door of code being free speech. So
I mean, every release from the Treasury Department about Tornado Cash or about any mixer, like, it always mentions the Lazarus Group. So it's, I mean, somebody in that department is signaling to Congress or whoever, like, look, we did something about these guys. Like, that's how I read it.
And that's Chainalysis. Chainalysis is acting like the SEC. And the day after Tornado Cash got hit with sanctions, Elliptic starts publishing articles about how we should go after Ren BTC Bridge and other bridge projects. So like, they're becoming, that's our outsourcing for the private industries are going to control regulation. And that gives them this crazy incentive to do whatever they need to be anti-competitive. And it's going to be another case of the early movers like Chainalysis and Elliptic and CipherTrace are going to control that completely. If the SEC, and that's policy based. So every 4 years, maybe that changes. But in general, they're the authorities. Everybody else, and if our mutual friend is right about Chainalysis, he's the only person I've ever heard say this. They're weak as an analytics company. Never heard anybody else say that. I don't think that's true. But he seems confident that they're more focused on business dev than on investigating what they have.
Interesting. When you say you bring up Chainalysis because they're contracted with the Treasury Department.
Yeah, they have the chokehold on the industry, and the Treasury Department is not the only one working with them. They do have information flowing in from intel organizations in the US. So they have backdoor ways to verify things like IP addresses for exchanges. They're actually breaching customer data on exchanges. They're the only company that I know that can do that. They can get geolocation data on customers to figure out specifically, like, when I find a wallet address and I can't see which customer it is, if it's from Binance, they don't even talk to Binance to get the customer data because they don't trust them to give it to them and be correct and compliant about it. So they're getting it backdoor through the NSA or whatever channels they have. I don't know how they do it. But if I could do that, I think it's illegal, but they're definitely doing it. And they've actually said that publicly. That's why I'm saying that so specifically. They did talk about that a bit. They probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, that was, I wrote about that because that was in, where was it? Where they're like, it was the Coinbase insider trading thing.
Yeah.
Where
I think
they
you're talking about the Mexican immigrant data for Coinbase. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, where they in a statement they're like, oh, we have geolocation data, and you're like, and everyone was like, how do you have geolocation data? Like, tell us how that works. And yeah, there was a lot of no comment after that. Where was that? It was definitely Coinbase.
Yeah, Coinbase got together with Chainalysis, and IRS is using Chainalysis software along with Coinbase to be able to track people's trades and stuff like that. So yeah.
Oh, you're right. It was the immigration stuff. Yeah, you're right.
So in other words, if Chainalysis Reactor doesn't catch it, the US government won't find out about it. That's my issue there. And our friend from JournoDAO, like that, he worked with Chainalysis Reactor, and he's telling me that it's shitty. So that's really interesting, right? That opens up a door of, you know, I do think there's a lot of stuff that the SEC just doesn't know about. And if I told them, it'd probably be the first time they heard about it. So there might be a business model there, and that's something else I'm kind of curious about. But if Chainalysis found me, they'd, like, you know, muscle me out and do it themselves. That's what everybody else would do too. So how do you build institutions and give them money from the public as a public good? That's the whole conversation. Yeah.
Right. Gitcoin.
Yeah, Gitcoin it'll solve all that. $76 million. Yeah, it's like a drop in the bucket in crypto. I want those bigger funds to, like, not compete with Gitcoin, but we need more. Kevin Owocki can't do all the heavy lifting there.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like we just missed the Kevin Owocki talk an hour ago in Denver.
He's a great guy.
So I've lined up a Gavin Wood TED Talk on commoditizing trust. Cool.
Andreas Antonopoulos is really good to listen to as well. Some of his early, you know, Bitcoin speeches, and, you know, telling a story about it, like you were saying, Nick, and he puts it in really good story format.
Yeah, like I've said that before, but the fundamental idea of, like, Bitcoin and Ethereum, the way they were originally pitched, like before DAOs were called DAOs, they're called DACs, decentralized anonymous corporations. I think that's actually a lot easier to understand than a bunch of kind of hippy dippy radical collectivism stuff. That turns a lot of people off because it sounds politically active, when it's more about just getting trust away from fraudulent institutions, because they're not, like, there's no resolve that those institutions are going to change. So I don't really have a great credit score, because if I need one, I can probably figure it out and game the system somehow to do that. Like, there's always a backdoor for the right white collar crime that you want to do. You just have to have money. And that's not news to anybody, but for some reason we've just kind of just accepted that, right?
Yeah, and the blockchain keeps that censorship resistant, keeps them honest, and you know, it's yeah, it's not about cutting out, you know, journalism and editors. It's about keeping the institutions honest by saying, hey, the truth is right there on the blockchain, you know.
And in the absence of real journalism, you get marketing agencies that are leveraging selectively their own narrative and using whatever information they can go and find with money. And a couple of guys looking on their computers, they can find information to sell whatever they're being told to sell, you know. So Coin Bureau is the biggest YouTube channel. Maybe they shouldn't be. They're a great place to find information, but they're a marketing agency. You know, Begless, I know, has, like, similar issues there, and it's not exclusive to anybody. It's kind of the entire structure is about, well, holy shit, we're making a lot of money. Why would we stop?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, one of the challenges with applying this to journalism is, and I mean, it's a challenge everywhere. The idea of, like, well, you can put it on the blockchain, and it's more transparent, censorship resistant, public, all that. But, like, even in journalism, you know, information is power, and information is leverage. And, like, when I brought that up with pretty high up journalists, they're like, well, like, nobody's actually going to want to do that. You know, like, journalists, like, at a certain level, like, you still want to control all your sources, you want to control all your information. You want to centralize it, because, you know, journalism remains a competitive industry. And so, you know, as much as it's supposed to be done in the name of the public, there's still, like, this business interest that is coloring, like, all the motivations. Even the idea of that, you know, we put out there of, like, well, you know, you could use a blockchain to keep track of you know, all the different revisions of a story and all the edits and the corrections, because that's not done transparently right now, and that's not great for, you know, our trust with the public. Like even that, there's resistance to that. Like, oh, we wouldn't want all that information to be public. I'm like, well, the ethical code says you do, but you know, like in practice, that's not always the way it goes. I mean, I was actually kind of shocked to have people say this actually out loud to me, like, oh, well, we don't want to make that public. It's like, can you imagine like saying that like to the public? We don't want to make our edits and our corrections available to you.
Yeah, or like a Congress budget spending, you know, if you want to make whatever we're spending in our governments, city governments, you know, state governments, public and transparent, each iteration of that budget, so anybody can see and anybody can report on it, and it can be available everywhere. Same thing, I guess, with edits of stories, right? But I mean, who's going to actually go back and follow those edits too, though? Like, you know, journalists, I would think, probably have tools of convenience that they use in order to speed up their work process. Am I correct in that? Just like any trade?
I mean, what do you, I guess I don't know what you mean.
Like, I don't know, like Reuters, right? A lot of people get their stories from like centralized news sources because they might not have the time or resources to go out and, you know, look up individual stories that
Either,
might,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. So
yeah, so you mean, do like journalists use like clearinghouses for information? Like, sure.
yeah, is that how it works? I mean,
it depends on the story. For like science, like, so like for what I do a lot for like science reporting, there are like a handful of like basically databases that like journalists have access to, and like you can get advanced access to like all the scientific papers that are coming out next week, and you know, like any press releases or stuff that go along with those. And those are like set up by, you know, nonprofits like the American Association for Science. Like they're like,
is anybody allowed to set up those databases, or like a blockchain would be totally public, free, open to everyone access? Or do you have to have certain credentials to access that type of stuff?
so that, I mean, that's like, so that's like what like decentralized science is working on, because that's another like science, like academic publishing is like way more fucked up than journalism.
Oh, yeah.
Because academic publishing, like, you know, all these like scientific papers, they're supposed to be like for the good of humanity. They're like all owned by like a handful of huge companies. And you know, there are like pirate sites that just take all those and just throw them like onto a database that's like based out of Iceland or something.
Okay.
So yeah, like that, like with like science, it's actually like an even more fucked up.
They went after them, by the way. ResearchGate is now the last one that is not, they're still pending lawsuits with all the, you know the story about like academic journals that banded together to go after them in the EU and close the court case to get Sci-Hub shut down.
I mean,
ResearchGate's the last one. Sci-Hub was shut down.
Was?
It's still active, but most of their content was removed or put behind IP paywalls.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
That was in 2018. Yeah.
I mean,
same year Microsoft bought GitHub.
ResearchGate isn't particularly useful either. So
it's the last one. Yeah. As far as I know, it was Sci-Hub and ResearchGate.
Interesting.
So yeah, I don't know, kind of off track with that, but
Okay.
yeah, I forget what your question was, John.
Okay, I don't know. I'm just poking a lot of different questions at things. You know, like I said, I don't really know the journalism process, so I'm going to write out what I
probably do more than you think.
Yeah, maybe so, but like I want to write out what I think I know about it.
Yeah.
And then I want you guys to poke holes and say, yes, this is true. This is totally way off base. And then just see where we are, you know, and like, maybe I might be able to represent like a large swath of just lay people that don't know what goes on, and then how decentralization can kind of fix that and include people on what's going on, you know.
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's a great mystery. I think the only thing that like maybe gets lost on the public is number one, the public assumes that we're all paid and that we're all getting like paid by one side or the other, which I don't know many of those people. Like they're definitely out there, but they're usually pretty easy to spot as a marketer pretending to be a journalist. I mean, I just think the basic thing that people don't really get is like the goal is, I mean, it's like two things. You're like trying to figure out what the truth is, but like because it's impossible to really do that, you're just trying to tell the story of the process of trying to find the truth and do it in like the fairest way possible. That's like all it is.
So there's no like editor or that owns, or you're receiving grants, the company you're working for that will kind of jump on your ass if you start to say things in a way that it shouldn't be said, and you have to adhere to those guidelines, even if it kind of goes counter to what what the data may say. You know,
So like I think at smaller places maybe like
yeah.
you run it, and I've heard of that, like places where it's like, maybe not, it wouldn't even be considered journalism. Like small, like I've heard that at like early in my career, like really small like tech sites, and they had like, maybe they had like a big advertising deal with Microsoft or something. Like you would hear stories of like, okay, let's not piss these guys off. Like the only case of that at a place where I've worked at like a national outlet where I've worked in the last 15 years was when CBS owned CNET, and I was writing there, I still am. CBS had like a legal dispute with Dish, right? And so there, and I don't remember the specifics, but it was like Dish had like, they had like some new, it was like, I think it was their DVR product called the Hopper. And so like somebody from CBS basically didn't like that CNET had given this thing like a great review and like prominently featured it. And so like somebody from CBS corporate like made a comment, and like word got down to the newsroom that they weren't happy. And dude, it was like the biggest scandal like I've ever seen. Of like people, the newsroom were like, what? Like corporate's actually trying to come down and like influence our coverage. Like people quit, like other people threatened to quit and just like moved to different departments instead. And it was like, it was kind of a scandal. Like other places were writing about this scandal, and it was like a really minor thing. This was like corporate, like trying to like being unhappy about a review. Like it was, but the fact that they tried to put the thumb on the scale, like the newsroom like erupted. So like really like at a certain level of places that like consider themselves like serious and like have like an ethical code, like it really doesn't happen. Like what's more like worrying is kind of like political groupthink, like where like, and I think you see this, there's definitely outlets that have like decided that something is like the truth, and it tends to be around like issues where it's harder to establish the truth, like political stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because like you see this extreme surge in popularity right now on both the right and the left of these independent news agencies that are saying all mainstream media is bought and sold and paid for. And a lot of people are increasingly believing this. And a lot of mainstream journalists are defecting to a lot of these news groups on both sides of the spectrum, so something is missing and wrong here. And I don't really know what it is, and how can decentralization help that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like the decentralization question is the one that I'm curious about too. But I mean, the big problem, like all of this, I think stems from like cable news like having shows that are like, I'm gonna have to go. My kid keeps calling me. They have shows that are like 100% like opinion based.
Yeah.
Like Sean Hannity's not a journalist, okay? And so like I feel like that's what people, and it does, and it does kind of bleed over. Like, I mean, I just kind of think cable news is the worst. Like you do catch like on like Fox and even like something like the CNN, you'll catch Anderson Cooper like editorializing, and it's like, what are you doing, man?
Okay.
You know, so yeah, I don't know. I stopped covering politics like 15
Yeah.
years ago. It would be a mess to do it now.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah, I mean, there's something to that. But in terms of like a sponsor, like trying to like put a thumb on the scale like that, I don't see.
Okay.
Among like, you know, major outlets with actual reputation. I gotta go. I don't. My kid has called me 5 times, so I gotta
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I gotta pay attention to my kids too. It's had a lot of questions. I'll write it out and give it to you guys.
Yeah, let's go back and forth in a doc or something. That sounds
Okay.
good.
All right.
Look forward to it. See you
All
guys.
right. Take care, y'all.